Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. You have tuned in ever so wisely to America's home for conservative, not bitter talk. I'm your host, the one and only, the ever so benevolent dictator here behind the microphone, Todd Huff. Today is Q&A Friday. Something that I've kicked around doing, and I guess we've done versions of this before, but I'd like to do more of it. So I want to talk about some of your questions, some questions I've heard, some questions that I want to answer. If you have questions, if you have topics, if you have things you want to discuss, you can always share those with us here on the program. But of course, on Q&A Friday, it's the best time to do that. That's when we kind of go through loose ends during the week and so forth. Email, where you can send questions, todd@toddhuffshow.com. You can also text 317-785-1030. That's a text line directly to me. And I read those messages, my friends. So anyway, it is good to be here today. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through some questions, but I want to mention here off the top a little bit about MyPillow, a partner of this program. MyPillow is, of course, a company that we've partnered with for several years now. They make high-quality products that increase comfort in your life. Comfort that can help you when you need a good night's sleep. I have the MyPillow pillow. We have sheets. We have towels. We have slippers, my friends. Even dog bed, a dog bed for Echo, Tango, and Kilo, the newest addition here to the Huff family of dogs. They give it 2 paws up. I give it 2 thumbs up, my friends. I use the pillow. 2 main reasons I like it. I've shared on this program before. I'm a side sleeper. I've got a big head, as you can see if you're watching on the stream. I've got broad shoulders as well. That's a perfect combination for a neck that is out of alignment unless you have a pillow that fits into that gap ever so nicely. MyPillow's pillow does just that, and it also has cooling technology to boot. I absolutely just despise being hot when I try to sleep. I don't care to be hot. In fact, I prefer to be hot over cold during most of the day, but not at night. And the cooling technology helps bring comfort and restful sleep. So, mypillow.com, if you want to check out their products, upgrade your pillow, get some sheets, whatever. You can shop there. There's lots of products that you may not even be aware of. MyPillow.com. Promo code Todd's going to get you discounts on those products. Again, MyPillow.com. Promo code Todd. All right, so today, reading a question here asking about really fundamentally, what is conservatism? What are, as this question is phrased, what are the 5 core beliefs of conservatism? And so I want to address this today. We are in an ideological Cold War, my friends. We've talked about this on this program for a long time. We are in a cold civil war. There is a battle of ideas. There is a battle of, well, good ideas and bad ideas. The good ideas, of course, are to embrace this country's foundational principles as introduced, as framed by our founding fathers. The Constitution, liberty, free markets, these sorts of things, versus government taking control of things. Now, this comes under a whole plethora of names. Some people will say they're democratic socialist. That sounds a little less offensive to many people because it's got the word democratic in front of it. And after all, we've been told relentlessly for a long time that we have a democracy here in the United States of America. Of course, we have a constitutional republic. And of course, There are certainly democratic aspects to it, but we do not have a pure democracy. The founders did not want it that way. The founders were skeptical of pure, unfettered democracy. There is a tyranny of the majority there's to be concerned with. There's a tyranny of the minority to be considered. Our founders were quite astute. They were students of history. They were students of political thought. They paid attention to what worked and what didn't. They also had a relationship, the vast majority of them, with the creator of this universe. They understood the truths that were proclaimed in biblical Christianity, in the scriptures and so forth, and they understood human nature. They understood the tendency of humanity to abuse power, to sin, if you will, to move away from liberty and more towards control. This is the nature of humanity. I've said before on this program, when we're created in the image of God, the first thing that we know, the first thing that is revealed to us in the Bible, if you read it cover to cover about who God is, the first thing we realize is God is a creator. He's creative. It says, in the beginning, God created, right? That's the sixth word, if I'm counting correctly. In the beginning, God created, the fifth word, the heavens and the earth. So quickly, if you read through the scriptures and if you believe, well, candidly, even if you don't, it is the truth. But nonetheless, if you believe the scriptures, we know that God is creative. We're made in his image. So we have a creative nature as well. Not, of course, to the extent of God. That's not what I'm saying. We're not little gods. We're just made in his image. We're like him. We're a reflection of him, far from his, of course, perfection, but we're like him in a sense. And so we are creative as well. And so in fact, if you look at the instructions that God gave to people when they were on this earth, he gave them dominion over the earth. He told them to go forth and be fruitful and multiply. And there is something that is divinely inspired to build and to grow things, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So we build families, husbands and wives have children, and God willing, grandchildren and all that sort of stuff. You build a home, you build a community, you build an extended family. You build a church, you build a business, start off as a small business in some cases, grow that business, expand that business, maybe open alternate sites or multiple locations or whatever. It can, there's a vast, there's just a whole list of ways you can expand and grow all sorts of things. And so when we look at the process of governing ourselves, which, by the way, government is ordained of God. This is a necessary thing this side of heaven. And so conservatives, people like me, say that we keep those things in mind. We keep in mind human nature. We keep in mind the way that mankind builds things and grows things. And normally those are good things, right? To expand and to grow, and to put something together piece by piece to make it as good as we possibly can. When it comes to government, though, we have to look at other factors. We have to look at the tendency of humanity throughout the course of history for government to become more oppressive, more top-down, you do what I say sort of thing, taking away liberty, taking away opportunity, putting burdens upon the people, saying you have to pay this, we're going to take this by force, because at the end of the day, government is force. And the way I look at it, it's not the way that they tell you to look at a political continuum with communism on the left and fascism on the far right, and then try to find out where you are on the graph. I look at it differently. I look at it and say there's a continuum that says there's government control at one end of the spectrum, and it makes no difference whether that control is through communism, through socialism, through fascism, whatever. It's government control. It's less freedom. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have absolutely no government at all and absolute anarchy at the other end. And so what the founders did, and it was brilliant, by the way, They said, look, we want a government that's large enough to do what the people of this country have told the government and have given their consent for the government to do. This is called the consent of the governed. And so what we give our consent to the government to do, we want the government to be large enough to do that. We're going to be very, very careful in putting together this Constitution that gives the government very clear boundaries, very clear lines, very clear responsibilities and powers, this balance of power, this separation of powers, 3 branches of bicameral legislation with the Senate, the House of Representatives, all this sort of stuff. We're going to frame it into this Constitution so that they know that the government knows what its responsibilities are. And we want that government to be big enough to do those things, but not any larger. And so again, you have tension, you have friction, because the nature of mankind is to build and to grow things. But we understand that government is force, and government is a growing government that's not put in check, that's not watched meticulously by the people, is a threat to their liberty. And the founders understood that our freedoms, our liberties, our rights come from God Almighty, those things that we're already given those things. And the government should seek to secure those things and do the other things that the people, the limited activities, responsibilities that the people have given their consent to the government to do. And so they frame this thing in the Constitution. It's a beautiful thing. And now, though, we've deviated. People don't even know any of that. I mean, you know that if you've listened to this program, if you've studied conservative thought and that sort of stuff, what America really is, you know those things, but you don't. Many people don't have any idea. They think politics is, what's the issue of the day? Oh, the issue of the day is transgender athletes. Well, I think we should let that happen. And then someone else says, no, I don't think so. And they say, well, boys are boys and girls are girls. Well, that's offensive to somebody, so let's put this up to a vote. Let's put this out on Facebook. Let's share our opinions. I had someone share yesterday on one of my Facebook posts, which if you haven't, I encourage you to follow us on Facebook. That's the place that we're growing the fastest and reaching the most people, and you'll be able to help get the conservative, not bitter message out. But again, some of you just don't do social media. I get that, by the way. But if you follow us there, that's the best way to help us on social media. But regardless, I had someone tell me that there was research done. Of course, I don't know. First of all, was this research actually done? Second of all, was it legit? Thirdly, is the person explaining the research correctly to me? I have no idea. But this person said there's been research done between trans women, which again means biological men or fake women, and women. And they compared them, and they've realized, they've come to a scientific conclusion. It can debunk any sort of differing opinion whatsoever, that there's not a big enough difference between trans women and biological women, which is mind-boggling to me, because I've lived and I've paid attention and I've watched sports, and it is insane to make such a claim. I don't know if this stuff, you got to ask questions. If it is legit, who's funding this garbage, right? Is it funded by the woke mob or people who lean left, who want to see government step in and allow this sort of thing? I don't know, but there is no way. In fact, I think my comment to the person was, I can't believe you typed those words, because it's insane to me to think, there's a line from the movie JFK. I'm old enough to remember. I didn't see that movie in the theater, but I did have the VHS of that movie. And in the movie, I think I've talked about this recently here, it says Jim Garrison, who's played by Kevin Costner, the district attorney in the movie, the main character, he says, I'm going to paraphrase, but theoretical physics can prove that an elephant can hang off the side of a cliff with its tail tied to a daisy, but we have common sense. We understand that that's nonsensical. There is nothing that makes that happen in reality. We have common sense. And listen, there are things that, again, my dad has a term that he's used throughout his life that I've co-opted here: overeducated idiots. I mean, for example, do you need research to prove to you that your spouse shouldn't cheat on you? Should we have lots of research and we study spouses who cheat on one another, and let's say someone does that. Say someone does that, and then they conclude that, look, there's no harm in this. Does that suddenly mean that is a good thing? I mean, people's ability to think and reason and the way that they fall at the feet of these people who have the credentials, I don't care. If you can't explain it to me, especially when there is incredibly obvious things, obvious signs and evidence right there for anybody to see, that men are dramatically better than women at sports. Typically, there's always exceptions where someone's stellar here, good at that. But in general, if you take the top men and put them against the top women, they're not going to win. I mean, how many times do we even have to see this? We've seen youth boys, what was it, like a 17, 18-year-old, maybe 16, I think it was 16-year-old boys soccer team beat the U.S. women's national team, and it wasn't even close. I want to say it was like 8-0. It was a blowout. In soccer, that's like losing in basketball 200-0 or something. I mean, it wasn't even close. And fortunately, you have women who are admitting this. Listen, you don't have to be a hater of women's sports to acknowledge that they're different. You can still have good sports. Oftentimes we don't get it. I've watched the WNBA. I promise you. Well, it seems to me they make about, 40% of their open layups. I don't know how they can do this. They seem to shoot better from three than they do at point blank range. Don't ask me to explain these things, but there are still things that's entertaining to watch for people who like sports, and I've got no problems with that. But let's not live in delusion to say that it's as good or better than the WNBA. I love these women that they asked. I saw one of the women. I saw one of the WNBA players asked on a podcast or something, who would you want to play throughout NBA history, or anybody, one-on-one? And this girl says Kobe Bryant. Oh, Kobe. I love Kobe, by the way. Kobe Bryant was a tremendous basketball player, tremendous competitor. And they said, so what would the score be? Well, Kobe would get me, but it would be 11-7. 11-7. Bet me it would be 11-0. And I don't think I don't think she would get a shot off, my friends. But the point is, you talk about these things today, people think that politics is just taking the issue of the day and saying, I feel this way about it, and therefore that's what the government should do. No, we need to have principles, and our founders had that. And if you don't understand what the principles are, if you don't understand human nature, the role of government, all these things, the idea that rights come from God and not from government, if you don't know those things, you're going to have a very, very bad political ideology, and many people do. And this has caused a cold civil war in our country today where there are quite literally communists on the other side. I'm not accusing everybody of being a communist on the other side, but there absolutely are. In fact, I'll play this really quickly. This is Q&A Friday, but I did come across this clip. This was Stephen Miller on Sean Hannity's program. I think this was last night. I don't know. He's talking about this very thing, about the rise of totalitarianism, the rise of communism in the ranks of the American citizenry today, and the dangers of that. This is quite literally true. Now, you can argue the degree upon which it is true, but I'm telling you, there are absolutely communists. Zoran Mamdani is one of those folks that I would include in that list. But they're becoming bolder. They're winning in some places primaries. This is not something to just roll our eyes at and kind of chuckle at. These people are gaining political momentum, and part of it's because we haven't articulated, they haven't heard, they don't understand what it is that makes America special, why these ideas matter. Here's what Stephen Miller had to say about
decades fighting a Cold War with the Soviet Union. Now, I choose my words carefully, but I'm going to say this tonight. Sean, that Cold War has come home. It's here in America. This is the biggest, greatest, most existential struggle this country will ever face, Sean. Because if communists get control of House seats, then Senate seats, and governor's mansions, The American dream that for 250 years our heroes bled and died for is gone, and it won't come back because they will never let you get it back. President Trump is the only thing right now standing between the American people and that abyss.
Yeah, and there's truth in that. Now, some people say, well, that's just the socialists. I said, my friends, if you read, say, Marx, for example, Marx said the end of socialism, the ends of socialism, the objective of socialism is communism, right? First, you have the government take everything over, control the means of production. They determine who gets what, and just somehow being completely fair. And this little utopia is created, but the objective is always a classless society. It really is. Now, some people don't say that, and some people don't admit that, and some people may not think that right now. But remember, it wasn't that long ago when people were telling us that the Democrats weren't socialists, right? I remember not that long ago at all. In fact, I remember a Democrat here in our community getting upset. Democrats aren't socialists. Now they're proudly proclaiming that. They're democratic socialists, but you can see how this creeps towards the left end of the political spectrum where it's totalitarianism, government control, and sitting right there at the far end of that political continuum is communism, is Marxism. That's what they think. They think that they have a right to what you've created, what you've earned. They think that they have the moral authority. They should have in their minds the political authority to take that, redistribute that, and make this a classless society. Make no mistake about it. That's where they're headed with this. I've got to take a break, but what I want to do is continue here. And I'm going to give you specifics to the question I started with. What is the question was, what are the 5 core beliefs of conservatism? And if you have questions that you would like to see us answer, address, talk about here on Q&A Friday, I welcome you to share those in the comments below or email me, Todd@ToddHuffShow.com. You can also text 317-785-1030. You've worked hard, my friends. You've made smart choices, and now it's about making sure that effort counts, not just today, but for the future as well. Full Suite Wealth helps forward-thinking people with a coordinated approach to wealth, legacy, and legal planning, including private equity, private credit, and options strategies. They'll help you see the big picture, plan ahead, and make your success truly matter for the people you care about most. The goal is a plan that stands the test of time. Visit fullsuitewealth.com. Again, that's fullsuitewealth.com. Jason and his team will take great care of you, my friends. Build your legacy, secure your future. Time out for me. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. It is Q&A Friday, and I'll tell you, I reserve the right to answer these questions as I see fit. These questions in and of themselves may take me off on, I don't want to say tangents, because there's just avenues off of each of these questions that just getting the question makes me think about. So in this segment, we'll stay focused on answering the question, which again is, what are the core beliefs, or even the 5 core beliefs of conservatism? So I'll hit on those here, my friends, in just a moment. If you're curious about Kratom, though, we're just trying to figure out who you can trust, take a look at Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They are a family-run company that offers natural, lab-tested Kratom, not that synthetic garbage that's given Kratom a bad name. Real Kratom is responsibly sourced. It's tested for purity. It's not synthetic, and that's what Christopher's is all about. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia. They follow the traditions, the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. There are no gimmicks. There are no shortcuts, just clean, honest alternatives for people looking for a more natural way to support their health. If you're interested, if you want to give this a try, if you've done your research and think that this makes sense for you, start with their Kratom Starter Pack. It is a great way to begin. Coupon code ToddHuff saves you 10%. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's But my setup here this morning, my friends, let's talk about the core beliefs of conservatism. I think at the core, at the very basic foundational level, you have to talk about liberty. You have to talk about freedom. So this is where the Bill of Rights comes from. So we say that our rights come from our Creator. And if you look at the Bill of Rights, which is just our founding fathers' attempt, if you will, to enumerate some, but not all of our rights. This is just basically some of them. Not, again, if it's not the responsibility of government in the Constitution, then the government shouldn't be doing it. And so those rights, and the 10th Amendment says this, are retained by the states and by the people. So, but liberty says that we have the right to be ourselves. We have the rights to have our own opinions, to say what we want to say, to assemble with the people we want to assemble with, to gather together with people, or even as an individual, to petition the government for a redress of grievances. If the government has done something we don't like, we can absolutely say that to the government. We have the rights to protect ourselves from common criminals, protect ourselves from tyrants in the government, and we can use whatever means necessary, including firearms, the right to keep and bear arms. That's why the Second Amendment is in there. We have the right to worship. A lot of the people who founded this country fled religious persecution. They were either told they couldn't worship the way that they were worshiping, or that they had to be part of a state church or whatever. It wasn't religious liberty. They didn't have religious liberty in the places that they were. In fact, every Thanksgiving, I continue the tradition of the late, great Rush Limbaugh, where we talk about the true story of Thanksgiving. And we talk about the path, the journey of the pilgrims, first going to Holland and to, again, for the purposes of religious liberty. They were being persecuted, and eventually they came here to the United States. We know that story, and we'll talk in more detail about that as Thanksgiving comes here in the next several months. But liberty is the first most important thing. God created us to be free. He gave us rights to work, to have the benefits, or I guess the earnings from my work, whatever it belongs to me, right? That's how it should be. The lovers of big government don't see it this way at all, and they'd be wrong, by the way. We have the right to property. These things matter. People can live their lives, pursue their goals, pursue their interests as they see fit, with as little government interference as necessary. Liberty is essential. And if you want to know if you really stand up for liberty or just for the freedom of people who agree with you, ask yourself if you would stand up and defend the rights of someone to engage in something that you disagree with, maybe even to do something that you find abhorrent, not illegal, not, my right to swing my arm ends where your nose begins. I can't use my liberty. Someone else can't use their liberty to directly infringe upon someone else's life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness. Doesn't mean they can't do something that someone else disagrees with or anything like that. But what it does mean is that liberty, and whether or not you support liberty, is the question is, will I support someone who has the right to do something that I disagree with? That used to be the test. It still is the test. It's just that is never discussed today. In fact, today, if someone disagrees with you, you're encouraged to hurl insults. You're encouraged to say bad things about them on social media and call them names and everything else. I could write books on those things. Maybe that is something I'll do at some point. The nasty things people have said to me on social media. It bothers me none, by the way. When I started, it was tough to adjust to. But now it matters zero to me. It matters zero to me what people say. So individual liberty is a foundational principle of conservatism. If you want to say one of the 5 core components, it definitely would belong. Limited government. I talked about this in the first segment. Again, we want a government that can do the things that the people have given their consent to that government to do. but we don't want it to be any larger. And so, again, if you want to know what the government's supposed to do, see the Constitution of the United States. If you want to understand that the government's first role is to secure the rights of the individuals, and you're not sure what a right is, look at the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. And our government should be big enough and powerful enough and have the resources it needs to do the basic things that the people have given their consent to the government to do. And it should be able to also secure the rights of the people, the liberties of the people. Free markets and private property is a big part of conservatism as well. This is where this ideology, dare I say the truth, conflicts on a lot of fronts with democratic socialism, communism, but this is perhaps the one that it hits it squarely, head on, just direct frontal assault by the communists out there. The communists want to see the end of private property. In fact, the socialists want to see a decrease in the private property, right? You have people now that are running for office who are, say, in Zoran Mamdani's, not his campaign now, his administration, who want to see privately owned rentals, apartment buildings and so forth, see those seized by the government. They're saying these sorts of things, my friends. There's congressional candidates across the country that are calling for the same thing. There are podcasters and influencers and leftist commentators out there that are calling for the same thing, the abolition of private property. They won't come out and say that, many of them at the beginning. They'll say that government should take control of some of these things. And of course, it's going to be better. We see Zoran Mamdani. Now, he did not take control of existing grocery stores, but he's certainly impacting the other privately owned grocery stores, or will be, in New York City, because they are having 5 public grocery stores. And they say that their prices are going to be 30% less than what the privately owned grocery stores are. Of course, this is going to cause havoc. This is not going to work. By the way, did you see you have to show an ID to prove? I love it, by the way. They'll die on the hill that says, Democrats will, you don't have to show an ID to vote. If you have to show an ID, that's racist, that's a poll tax, and all these other stupid things. But by golly, you got to show an ID to get into Zoran Mamdani's grocery store in New York City. But they love government controlling things. And, to some people it sounds good, but it never works, my friends. Free markets are infinitely better. Government can't control and manage these things. It's far beyond the scope of how governments can operate, what they're even capable of doing. And private property is, of course, necessary to freedom as well, my friends. There's a few other things I want to hit on as far as the core foundational principles of conservatism and so forth. I got to get to those after the break because I'm up against the clock, my friends. But conservatives, it's time to take a stand with your wallet. That's why we created Freedom Marketplace. It's a free directory of businesses that share your values, and they refuse to support leftist candidates, leftist causes. There's no logins, though you can create one. There's no gimmicks. It's just a simple way to connect you with businesses that love America like you do, who care about these principles. If you're tired of funding the woke agenda, head on over to freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net. It's free, it's easy, and if I say so myself, my friends, it's the patriotic thing to do. Liberty and business for all at freedommarketplace.net. Quick timeout for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of the entire week. I know time flies when you're having fun, my friends. If you've missed anything during the week, shame on you, my friends. I'm just kidding. You can always go back and follow us. One of the easiest way to do that, of course, you can download the podcast. You can browse social media to look at clips, but perhaps the best way is to join the Inner Circle. It is free. It gives you my take. It gives you additional content. It's delivered to your inbox each weekday evening. You can sign up for free. Just text me the word join, 317-785-1030. Again, text the word join to 317-785-1030. That'll get you signed up for that. Again, it's totally free. All right. I went through 3 of the 5, if you will, and you can add to this, but this is, I think, fairly comprehensive about conservative political thought. The 5, if you want to say the 5 core foundational beliefs of conservatism, we've covered those here today. We talked about individual liberty. We've talked about limited government. We've talked about free markets and private property. By the way, if you want to really upset a socialist, and forget about that for a moment, if you just want to proclaim the truth, tell a socialist that that free markets have done more to lift people out of poverty, to help people who were struggling financially, to help lift the standard of living both here and around the globe than anything socialism could have ever remotely dreamed about. Because that's true, my friends. 2 other principles of conservatism: constitutional government and the rule of law. You know, it's interesting to me. A couple of years ago, my pastor asked me to come on stage during service and kind of do a Q&A about politics, because of course it's heated times and all that. And we didn't get into, it wasn't an argument for these beliefs specifically. I was just talking about government and just biblically how Christians should view government, that sort of stuff. And in this country, we don't have allegiances to a leader. We don't have a king. We have representative government, constitutional government. So again, I've hit on this previously. The Constitution lays out what the government can do, what each branch can do. It's very specific. And it says if it's not in that document, then it's not the job of the federal government. So it's important to have the rule book, right? Conservatism says this is what the government should do. And it logically follows, right? So when we won our liberty, our freedom from England, from the Brits, we didn't have the founding fathers step in and say, now we're going to be the ruling class, tell you what to do. What they did was they said, listen, here are our, we know that our rights come from God. We know that this has to be a government of, by, and for the people, as Lincoln would later say in his Gettysburg Address. And so they didn't just take over. They said the people were going to tell the government what to do, as they formed the government through the Constitution, ultimately. And the government was not going to dictate to the people what to do. This is important. And so the people, the Constitution, is the consent of the governed through their elected representatives at that constitutional convention to frame what consent they had given the government. And then they took that consent and said, here's how we're going to make it work. Here's how we're going to safeguard our liberties. We're going to separate the powers, checks and balances, all that kind of stuff. So that's important, constitutional government and the rule of law. Again, we're not pledging to support a king or a person. We're supporting the rule of law. And so if you don't like the law, just like what's happening in the streets right now with ICE, right? People who protest ICE. You can protest ICE all you want, but what's happening is the actual execution of law. That's what's happening. Now, you can point to maybe examples just with anything where someone violated the law. Certainly those things happen. I'm not excusing it. Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but you could potentially, you're going to find this in anything. But you say that is the law. The law is if you're here illegally, you need to be deported. That's the law. If you want to change the law, then try to change the law. Don't just try to tell people, demand that they stop following the law by intimidation and tactics that interfere with the execution or the enforcement of the law. That's not conservatism, my friends. And I'm running out of time here. The last one is I think conservatism relies on ultimately the individual. And so it relies upon traditional values. I would say Christian values, Christian truth. We want to see strong families. We want to see communities that are strong. We want to see faith that is strong. Not forced, but it's what we want to see because we know that has a good impact, right? You can't legislate morality, but if you have people who are convicted by the Holy Spirit of God living amongst the population, then people will use their freedom. Then you got an additional check on that liberty. They use their freedom under the direction, guidance, conviction of the Holy Spirit, and that's a good thing as well. We want to see local organizations. We want to see things that are, nonprofits and churches that are solving problems instead of government. That matters tremendously as well, the values that we hold. And the music's telling me I'm out of time here, my friends. Thank you so much, again, for joining me on this Q&A Friday. Hope you have a great weekend. Talk soon. SDG.